Now, live from your local election headquarters, this is 12 News Now.
A projected upset in Cranston District 15, House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello trailing Republican challenger Barbara Ann Fenton Fung.
Plus, voters still waiting in line in western states as results in the presidential race continue to trickle in. We'll have an update on who's leading.
And the Board of Elections working to count a record-breaking number of mail-in ballots that could determine the outcome of several races.
But first tonight from your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Heggie.
I'm Mike Montecalvo. It's election night. The polls are now closed and the results continue to pour in.
However, there's a chance we don't have the final result for several days or even weeks. We have a team of reporters covering the race for the White House, local elections, issues that voters ran into, and more.
Plus, we are tracking the results of ballot questions in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. But first, here's the latest on some results. Now, one of the biggest headlines of the night, a possible major upset here in the race at the Rhode Island State House. The AP is projecting that Republican Barbara Ann Fenton Fung has beaten House Speaker Nicholas Mattiello in the District 15 race. You can see it right here with 75% of the votes in today. Fenton Fung with 66% to Nicholas Mattiello's 34%. We'll hear from Fenton Fung in just a moment.
In the race for the White House, Biden has been declared the winner in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Our political reporters are going to break down what these numbers mean for us. But as you can see, with 56% of the vote in, so this is where it gets a little confusing. So as we just told you, former Vice President Joe Biden has been declared the winner in Rhode Island, Massachusetts. This screen you're seeing right now is actually the popular vote. Donald Trump appears to be taking the popular vote at this hour with 51% of the vote here.
All right, let's show you another potential upset in the state of Rhode Island. This is race for mayor of Warwick. There was no Republican candidate in this race. That is independent Frank Bacozzi with 41% in. He's got 89% of the votes. Frank with over 17,000 votes to incumbent Joseph Solomon, who has received just 2,200 votes with the accounting so far. Obviously, there are more counting to be done.
But let's go back to that race for the coveted seat in the Rhode Island State House, because this could be a major upset. As we said, Republican Barbara Ann Fenton Fung, the wife of Cranston Mayor Alan Fung, is vying for District 15, the seat held by Democratic Speaker Nick Mattiello, and as of right now, she is in the lead.
And 12 News reporter Steph Machado joins us now live from Cranston with the latest. Steph?
Hi guys, well we're kind of in a holding pattern here in Cranston District 15. There have been no updates to the vote totals in about 2 hours since those initial in-person votes went online, giving Barbara Ann Fenton Fung a large early lead. She's up by about 1,200 votes, and that's what caused the Associated Press to call this race for her. But listen, the number of votes that have not yet been counted or that results have not yet been posted is 2 to 3 times the lead that she currently has. We don't know the exact number because there are some mail ballots that folks might have dropped off in boxes today, but we do know that there are a large number of both early votes, folks who went to Cranston City Hall to vote, and mail ballots that are still out there here in District 15. And so Barbara Ann Fenton Fung did address her supporters here at her watch party in Cranston about an hour and a half ago. She thanked them, but she did not declare victory. And here's a little bit of what she said to me around that time.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So we won every single machine in every single precinct. We built on all the great work that this guy behind me, Steve Fries, did over the past 2 elections. And, you know, we talked to people at the doors. We talked about healthcare reforms. We talked about education. And those were messages that were really resonating with people. And to be honest, they were ready to reject the pretty nasty campaign and unfortunately what goes on at the State House type of culture that, you know, when they're talking about spying on families with young children, using taxpayer-funded positions in their campaigns. And I think people in District 15 saw it, realized it, and they were just saying it's time for a change.
And to give you an update on the Mattiello campaign, they are not having a watch party tonight. The speaker told me earlier today that he would be taking in the returns just with close family and friends, and then he would go to his campaign headquarters here in Cranston on Oaklawn Avenue to speak with reporters when the results were in. Well, we do not have the results enough for him to say one way or the other how the race has gone, and so he has not gone to his campaign headquarters yet. It is empty there. and closed up. And things are pretty quiet here as well at Barbara Ann's party. Folks have gone inside and are sort of just in a holding pattern, like I said, waiting for those results. Live in Cranston, Steph Machado, 12 News.
Steph, thank you very much. Now to the race for mayor in Rhode Island's second largest city.
Cranston Mayor Alan Fung, Barbara Ann's husband, has reached his limit of serving 2 4-year terms, and now the position is up for grabs. The two candidates, Democrat Maria Bucci and Republican Ken Hopkins. Right now, Hopkins is in the lead. 12 News reporter Brandon Truitt has been following this race all day long and joins us. Brandon?
Well, Mike and Shannon, you'll be hard-pressed to find a candidate maybe in better spirits than Ken Hopkins. So far, he is saying that they are very confident in the numbers that they have been seeing, although, as we keep repeating, there are still really 2 rounds of votes still to be released. But as you were just mentioning, Ken Hopkins at this point has about a 2/3 lead over Democrat Maria Bucci. We are still waiting on roughly 13,000 mail-in ballots that were sent out to Cranston voters. That certainly will add significantly to the total that has been counted so far. Just a short time ago, Ken Hopkins addressed some of his supporters here, where he talked about really the lowest part when he started this race just after his wife had died last December.
Where I was 1 year ago, it was in the depths of despair in the bottom of the valley. And now I've climbed it. I've climbed the mountain and I've reached the top. I am going to be your next mayor.
And of course, only really time will tell if that is in fact the case, but you can see they are very confident in the numbers they are already showing. Now, Hopkins, of course, running against Maria Bucci, who decided not to hold a large watch party. Instead, the Bucci campaign is watching along with just her family and close advisors. It is not a public event, citing the coronavirus pandemic. That was a strategic choice that the campaign made. I did reach out to that campaign, and they're telling me, quote, that there are still thousands of votes still to be counted, and they're not planning to comment much past that. We're live in Cranston. Brandon Truitt, 12 News.
Thank you, Brandon. Taking a look now at some of the key congressional races impacting residents in southeastern Massachusetts.
There is 1 U.S. Senate race and 2 in the House of Representatives we're keeping an eye on. Now, the first, longtime Democratic Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey is being challenged by Republican Kevin O'Connor, who was endorsed by Governor Charlie Baker. And you can see with 63% of the results in, Markey has been declared the winner, easy winner over O'Connor, 68% to 32%. This, by the way, is a 6-year term.
In the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District, the two candidates, Republican Julie Hall and Democrat Jake Auchincloss. Auchincloss right now with 65% taking the lead here against Julie Hall. This seat is currently held by Joe Kennedy III, who did not run for re-election. He, of course, instead decided to run for Ed Markey's seat in the Senate, and Kennedy lost to Markey in the primary.
In the House District 9, incumbent Democrat Bill Keating is up against Republican Helen Brady and independent Michael Manley. And as you can see, with 45% of the vote in, Keating with a sizable lead, getting 61% of the vote. Members, by the way, of the House serve 2-year terms.
12 News reporter Sheena Losciuto joins us now in studio with the latest from Massachusetts. Sheena?
Well, first let's start with the Senate race. The AP declared Ed Markey the winner just 2 minutes after the polls closed. If you saw the numbers, you can probably see why. Markey dominating his challenger, Republican Kevin O'Connor. Markey gave his acceptance speech virtually about an hour ago. O'Connor was hoping to be a fresh face on Capitol Hill. He asked voters to imagine having both a strong Republican and Democrat in the Senate, but ultimately he says he's already spoken to and congratulated Markey. Markey has a decades-long history of being a member of Congress, and he says he's excited now for the next 6 years.
We will not return to the so-called normal. We will not take the easy way out or find the middle ground. We will think bigger, act bolder, and be braver. Our young people are ready. Let us join them. I am so proud of this campaign and what we stand for. And I have never been more hopeful about the future of our country.
And it was a civil campaign, and I think that was good for Massachusetts. I am very proud of the campaign that we ran.
Moving on now to the race in District 4, unofficial results have Jake Auchincloss with a notable lead over Julie Hall. Both Auchincloss and Hall are military veterans aiming to fill the seat vacated by Congressman Joe Kennedy. Auchincloss is a city councilor in Newton, while Hall is a former Attleboro city councilor. District 4 includes parts of Fall River, Taunton, and Attleboro. Now, actually, I just saw on Twitter in the last 15 minutes or so, our partners in Boston are reporting that Auchincloss has declared a victory already tonight. However, we did have a crew at Hall's viewing party. She says she will not concede tonight. There are still more votes to count. I'm Sheena Lusciuto, 12 News.
Sheena, thank you. 2020 has been a year that most of us will never forget, with a global pandemic, a modern civil rights movement, natural disasters, and a polarizing election.
And those issues likely the reason for record voter turnout here and across the U.S. Let's send it over to 12 News reporter Kim Kalunian, who spoke with voters today. She joins us live in Providence with more on what they had to say. Kim?
Well, Shannon and Mike, at the end of the day, the election is about the people who vote in it. And the voters I spoke with today say they have never before felt as compelled as they did today to exercise their civic right. Record-breaking voter turnout in Rhode Island.
I can't just sit back and hope for the best anymore. I have to be a part of the change.
Whether they were among the roughly 300,000 Rhode Islanders who voted early or the more than 173,000 that cast ballots on Tuesday.
I wanted to come out and vote in person because I just wanted to make sure for sure that my vote was counted.
Voters had varying reasons for why they were voting, but they all agreed on the great importance of making their voices heard this year.
I think nothing less than democracy itself is on the line in this election. I think we have a very clear choice of which way this country wants to go.
Because I want kids out of cages, and I want everyone to be as gay and as queer as gay and queer as they possibly can be.
Estoy muy orgullosa hoy por haber dado mi voto. My presidente es strong. I'm sorry.
For Rachel Travis, this year was a turning point.
I had to do my part. This is my voice.
She not only made sure to shed her habit of skipping elections and instead voted early, but the ICU nurse who's seen COVID's impacts firsthand also signed up to be a poll worker.
I knew that there would be older people backing out of this job, which in the past has mostly been, retired people. So, somebody needed to step up and do it.
Stepping up and doing it, something close to 500,000 Rhode Island voters did, even in the midst of the ongoing pandemic. What do you make of 2020? I mean, we've dealt with so much, the pandemic, this unprecedented election cycle. What do you make of this year?
I mean, it's not always sunny. It's got to rain sometimes. And I think it's been like a learning experience for a lot of people. You got to suffer to know how joy feels.
Some words of wisdom for all of us there, and I did ask some of those voters how they plan to watch the results come in tonight in the presidential election. Some told me they would be watching through anxious tears. Others said they were not going to be watching at all, guessing that we would not know the official results for many days. Live in Providence, I'm Kim Kalunian, 12 News.
Thank you, Kim. And speaking of those results, the Board of Elections working to count all of the ballots, including an unprecedented number of mail-in ballots.
12 News reporter Walt Buteau has been following the count all night. He joins us live from the Board of Election headquarters in Cranston. Walt?
Staff members and seasonal hires started processing the nearly 160,000 mail-in ballots, about a third of the total amount of votes cast. They started processing those last week, and that continued up until about a half hour ago. BOE Executive Director Robert Raposa gave us his take on how it went a short time ago.
Overall election went extremely well. The planning that was put into place by the Board of Elections, the Board of Canvassers, we all pulled together. We made changes that definitely the changes came through, that they were all positive. It was all for the better. And we have actually made elections in the state of Rhode Island more safe and more secure.
Uncounted so far, 462 remote ballot boxes that are in various precincts throughout the state. Those will be brought in tomorrow on the next day and counted, but we're told those are a small percentage of the total. So most of the mail ballots have been counted, a very high percentage have been counted, and we should see those results shortly. Now we're live in Cranston. Walt Buteau, 12 News.
Well, thank you. Now to some more preliminary results in local elections. Joseph Moran and Maria Rivera are competing to be the next mayor of Central Falls. Rivera right now with 76% of the vote. This is with 44% reporting. Current Central Falls Mayor James Diosa is wrapping up his second and final term.
Take you to Woonsocket now. Incumbent Lisa Baldelli Hunt running for re-election, and with 46% of the vote in, she has a lead over John Brian, 54% of the vote to 46%. Target 12 investigator Tim White and politics editor Ted Nesi join us now live in studio with analysis. Guys?
Well, Ted, it's looking like it's going to be a long one. The presidential race is nowhere near being decided, and we did expect that. Let's take a look at the Electoral College results as they stand right now. In a lot of states, it's still too close to call. And Ted, political pundits talked a lot about how on Election Day it would look like Republicans are doing well, but that it could change, could change tomorrow, could change Thursday, it could change Friday. Here is the map right now of where it stands. Red, of course, is going towards President Trump, and the blue votes are the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and you see Joe Biden just jumped to that big 209 lead at 11 o'clock Eastern because California, the foundation of Democratic Electoral College coalitions has come in with 55 votes. So, look, there were Democrats who hoped to bury Donald Trump in a landslide. Donald Trump has thwarted that hope for them. It is too early to say he's going to find a path to victory, but he's made it a lot harder for Joe Biden than some of the pundits were predicting.
Look, it's a confusing night for a lot of people, even for us who have covered a lot of elections. Over on Fox Providence, you talked about your buckets over at the Board of Elections. I think it's worth repeating just to explain how the votes in Rhode Island are coming in.
Yeah, because we know this is confusing for everyone. So picture 3 buckets of votes. You have your Election Day in-person at the polling place traditional vote today. You have your early in-person bucket of votes, which is the ones that people went to town city halls in Rhode Island over the last 2 weeks or so. Then you have your mail ballots, whether you mailed them back or put them in a drop box. Right now, the Board of Elections in Rhode Island is only reporting that bucket of polling place votes. Those are all in, and those went more Republican, which we expected because that's what the president told his supporters to vote on Election Day.
Right.
But the second bucket, the bucket of the early in-person vote, is only partly counted, and the third bucket, the mail ballots, not a single one has been counted as of 2 minutes ago when I looked. So there is a lot of votes left to be counted around, which is why you're seeing some results that are a bit surprising.
Yeah, and you know what? That is happening in other parts of the country as well. So when you see the networks talk Ohio going this way or whatever, it could change in the coming hours or days. As you said, the polls close in California, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington State, all close at 11 o'clock. We will be tracking the results and bringing you them from the Update Center. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White, 12 News.
All right, thank you guys. The buckets are a great way to describe all of this. Thanks for the explanation. Turning now to the congressional races in Rhode Island. 3 longtime incumbents hoping to hold on to their seats in Washington. Democratic Senator Jack Reed is up against Republican Alan Waters right now. Jack Reed, by the way, has been declared the winner by the Associated Press with 57% to Alan Waters' 43%. Again, this is just today's in-person votes being counted, but again, the AP still declaring him the winner today.
Over in the House for District 1, Congressman David Cicilline is being challenged by 2 independents, Jeffrey Lemire and Frederick Wysocki. And as you can see right here, the congressman with 64% of the vote, Wysocki with 20% and Lemire with 16%.
And in Rhode Island's 2nd congressional district, Democrat Jim Langevin is up against Republican Robert Lancia. This is a great example of when you hear Ted talking about those buckets, because right now it looks as though Robert Lancia is taking this one with 51% of the vote. But again, this is just today's in-person numbers, 48% of those in right now, so we are still waiting for a lot of numbers to come in. Now to the ballot questions. Voters in Rhode Island were asked if they support amending the state's official name by dropping the words "End Providence Plantations" from the end of it. A yes vote supports the name change, a no vote opposes it. Today, Governor Raimondo encouraged Rhode Islanders to vote yes, and here are the results so far. 53% of Rhode Island voters rejecting this, meaning they want to keep the name the same. 47% approving it. Again, these are only today's in-person voting numbers, though.
There were two questions on the Massachusetts statewide ballot. The first regarding motor vehicle mechanical data and expanding the state's right to repair law. If approved, the proposed law would require car owners, repair shops, and dealerships have expanded access to wirelessly transmitted data related to their car's maintenance. If rejected, no changes would be made. Nearly $43 million has been spent from supporters and opponents of Mass Question 1, and here are the results. So far, with 64% of the vote in, yes has 75%, vote no with 25%.
The second question in Massachusetts is on ranked choice voting. If passed, ballots beginning in 2022 would have the option for voters to select a first choice, a second choice, and so on. The votes would then be counted in a series of rounds. If no candidate has 50% of the votes after the first round, the second choice votes would be counted, and so on until a candidate reached 50%. Now, Governor Charlie Baker and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito both oppose ranked choice voting. They believe it could delay results and increase the cost of elections. Here are the latest results for this. 53% of Massachusetts voters saying no. They want to keep voting the way it is now. 47% saying yes, they want ranked choice voting. This is with 64% of today's votes counted. Still waiting on the rest of those to come in. And our election night coverage continues now. 12 News political analyst Joe Fleming joining us. And you know, when we talked to you earlier, Joe, you said it was really hard to analyze any of this because we don't know what the actual results are.
We still don't. So we really can't analyze if the Republicans are picking up seats in the General Assembly or if they lost seats. Look at the 2nd Congressional District. Some of the early voting's come in, and now Jim Langevin a lot closer to taking the lead in that race. So we're going to have to wait till probably tomorrow to really have a clear picture of who's winning these races throughout the state.
So it's still hard, too, because the progressives made a big move to try to take some seats. Is that still too early for that, too?
Well, they made a big move, and a lot of those were in the Democratic primary, and a lot of those people are winning tonight, it looks like. But also, at the same time, a lot of them are unopposed. So they're going to pick up seats in the General Assembly, no question. The question is, will the Republicans knock off 2 or 3 Democratic seats in the General Assembly to make their caucus a little bit bigger? That's the big question tonight.
I know Ted was saying on Twitter he's hearing from a lot of people that are like, look at all the red votes, look at all the Republican votes. But Ted was saying that it's not surprising, seeing as President Trump had said to his supporters, go out, vote in person on Election Day.
You're 100% correct. Ted's right. If you look at the results right now, you would think the Republicans have made huge gains in the General Assembly. But I think when we see the early voting comes in and the mail ballots, they're going to be very heavily Democratic because the Democrats basically voted by mail. Republicans came out in person. So that was not unexpected tonight at all.
You know, every election, there's always a surprise. There's always an upset. We're looking at one right now in Cranston, District 15, with House Speaker Nick Mattiello.
Well, we are looking at an upset, but at the same time, keep this in mind. This is his 3rd really strong contested race. It's more of an independent district. I think the first 2 times he squeaked by. This time, I think he had a lot of baggage, and I think that baggage has finally caught up to him. He ran against an opponent that was better funded than the last 2 times and better known because her husband was the mayor of Cranston, was very popular. All those things played into this. And I think overall, she beat him. It was an upset, but not a major upset. People thought she had a good chance to win this race.
And with the Britt trial happening so close to the election and Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung really grasping onto everything that happened in that trial.
It didn't help at all. I mean, 2 years ago, Nick Mattiello had the right to life people with him. This time they were with Barbara Ann Fenton. So, I mean, there was a lot of changes in that district. She ran a very good campaign. She had a lot more money, so she was able to get a stronger message out.
All right. Joe, you've been here since what, 1984?
Yep.
You've seen it all.
Been through it all.
All right, you're not going anywhere. Thank you.